Plans for the port were first announced in 2012 by then Transport Minister Lui Tuck Yew. They were a part of a long-term project to boost shipping efficiency by consolidating operations in Tuas. Time and labour needed to shift containers between different terminals would be reduced. And works are being carried out in 4 phases. They're expected to be completed in the 2040s. Reclamation works for the port's first phase, well, that began in 2015, while similar works for the second phase started 3 years later. And then in 2019, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong officiated its groundbreaking ceremony. He said that the port presents Singapore with an opportunity to rethink the future of shipping and also double its port capacity. Now, the first 2 berths at Tuas Port commenced operations just 2 years later and just weeks after the first phase of reclamation works were completed.
And for more on Singapore's new megaport, let's talk to a shipping analyst. Jayendu Krishna joins us now. He is Director Deputy Head, Maritime Advisors at Drewry Financial Services. Well, thanks for joining us, Mr. Krishna. We're hearing all these advantages that this port has. Singapore, though, always faced stiff competition from other ports, not just across this region from China to Malaysia. So what does Tuas Port offer that helps us, I assume, maintain this competitive advantage?
Sure. So in terms of the competition, I would say, yes, Chinese ports and all the way up to Colombo is competition for Singapore. However, the major competitor is in Southeast Asia, that is Port Klang and Port Tanjung Pelepas. So if you look at what's happening today in Tuas, Tuas is touted to be a fully automated, intelligent, smart, sustainable, efficient port. And that is something which all the shipping lines desire. So they really want a very cost-effective solution, because typically shipping lines do not prefer to have transshipment services because it is essentially an additional cost. And therefore, they would prefer it to be a very cost-efficient one. By having a very automated and intelligent port, it is expected that it will become more cost-effective. And therefore, it will certainly be adding to the competitive advantage of the Singapore port, particularly compared to the other ports in the region. And some of the ports, actually in terms of competition, it's not only the major ports which are a competition, but also the feeder ports, the likes of Jakarta or Lam Chabang, Ho Chi Minh, where quite a significant number of boxes which are transshipped in Singapore go to. And as the volumes in these ports grow, as the infrastructure grows, you may expect some more direct services calling these ports in Southeast Asia. So effectively, even the Southeast Asian ports, which are not really a transshipment hubs, are a competition. But what we have seen historically is that the growth in efficiency hasn't been to the tune of what Singapore has achieved. And therefore, by having this modern port, we would expect that Singapore will retain its competitiveness over other ports.
Right. So, Mr. Krishna, Singapore does have a good track record in this regard, but we are expecting a next generation of mega container vessels as well. How is Tuas Port sort of positioned in terms of being future-proofed for that eventuality?
Sure. So in terms of the facility at Tuas Mega Port, it is going to have a 23-meter draft. So draft means, in a very simple terms, how deep a port should be in order to accommodate the largest of vessels. So Singapore is expected, will have about 23 meters draft. And if you look at the vessels which are built today, those have maximum draft of about 17 meters. So it means even if the vessel at a global level increases in terms of its size, in terms of its draft, etc., Singapore will be ready to really accommodate those big vessels. And whereas you will find that many of the terminals across the world may not have sufficient draft to be able to handle those large vessels. In addition, of course, Singapore will be a more sustainable port, and sustainability is one of the criteria which everybody is looking for today.
All right, Mr. Krishna, I'll pick you up on that. You talk about sustainability. I take it that refers not just to the automated feature, or rather the world's largest automated port, which is Tuas Port, also the fact that it was constructed in a way that meets the sustainability requirements. To meet these requirements, does Tuas Port in any way compromise in other areas that may cut into, for example, cost efficiency?
Well, okay. So if you look at some of the issues pertaining to decarbonization and particularly the energy, what has happened is over a period of, say, last 10 years or so, the cost of renewable sources of energy has really come down by about 80%. So what it means is that going forward in the long term, Singapore may be able to reduce the operating cost of the port. So I would say that it will really be advantageous from the port's perspective. That's number one. And number two, the sustainability is something which everybody looks for. So, for example, majority of the international multinational companies, they are looking to control the emissions, not only by their own activity, but also by the activities in their supply chain. So what is essentially termed as scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. So everybody is trying to reduce the emission across the board. So what it implies is that if Singapore has a lower emission, which it plans to achieve plans to be net zero by 2050, what it means is that Singapore will retain its competitiveness because the shipping lines would prefer the port with a lower carbon footprint. Why? Because consumers want it. And in fact, we have already begun to see that some of the ports or some of the shipping lines in the world actually are already offering low carbon services, which means that given two choices, one, a low carbon footprint port and a high carbon footprint port, any shipping line would prefer to choose a lower carbon footprint port. So I would say that it has a double advantage. One, it may be able to reduce the operating cost of the port, probably, given that the cost of renewables are falling. And secondly, it will become more attractive to the shipping lines, and therefore it will be encouraging probably more transshipment in Singapore compared to other competing ports.
Mr. Krishna, thank you very much for joining us and sharing those insights. Jayendu Krishna there from Drewry Financial Services.